In the heart of winter, when snow falls thick as secrets and the world holds its breath against the killing frost, even the smallest act of mercy can alter the course of fate. Ilara knew better than most what it meant to be an outcast, a healer living at the forest's edge, trusted but never truly welcomed. Her hands sought for mending wounds, but her company shunned when the work was done. Each night, she barred her door against the wilderness, against the wolves that prowled the shadows beyond the village boundary, against the loneliness that crept like ice through the cracks in her carefully constructed solitude. But on the night the blizzard howled with the fury of ancient gods, when a wounded wolf collapsed upon her doorstep, blood staining the pristine snow crimson, Ilara faced a choice that would echo through the 7 territories: turn away and survive, or open her door and risk everything. She did not know then that compassion could be more dangerous than any storm, that the amber eyes watching her from that broken body belonged to Darius, the Alpha King whose reputation for cruelty made even the bravest souls tremble. She did not know that mercy, once offered, cannot be taken back, or that saving his life would bind hers to his in ways no common healer could imagine. By the next full moon, the woman who had lived so small would stand before a kingdom, a silver crown upon her head, a mating mark upon her throat, and a truth burning in her heart: that sometimes, in saving others, we discover the power to save ourselves. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. Ilara huddled near her small hearth, fingers stretching toward the dying embers as winter's fury rattled her cottage windows. Outside, snow fell in thick, relentless curtains, piling against the wooden walls of her isolated home at the forest's edge. The villagers called this the killing frost, the first true storm of winter that claimed the weak and unprepared. In Wolfhaven, isolation meant death, yet isolation had become Ilara's sanctuary. She reached for the worn leather notebook beside her, opening to a fresh page to inventory her dwindling supplies. 5 days of firewood, herbs enough for 3 more poultices, food, if stretched carefully, to last a fortnight. The villagers would need her medicines before the snow melted. They always did, but today, no one would brave the blizzard to reach the witch's hut, as they called her home. Just as well, she whispered to the empty room. Peace for one more night. A violent gust shook the shutters, sending a chill dancing up her spine. Ilara pulled her woolen shawl tighter, returning to her careful accounting. 27 seasons she had survived, 17 of them learning the healing arts, 5 of them practicing alone after her mentor's passing, 5 winters of whispers, sidelong glances, and mothers pulling their children closer when she passed. The howl pierced the night so suddenly that Ilara's quill skidded across the page, leaving a jagged line in its wake. She froze, listening. The forests surrounding Wolfhaven housed many predators, but that sound, it wasn't the triumphant cry of a hunter. It was a call of agony, of desperation. When it came again, more feeble than before, Ilara found herself on her feet, moving toward the window. Pushing the shutter open, she peered into the swirling white darkness, seeing nothing but the ghostly shapes of pine trees bending in the gale. Not your concern, she told herself firmly, closing the shutter. The strong survive, the weak perish. Nature's law. The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. She had devoted her life to defying that very law, hadn't she? What was a healer but someone who fought against nature's cruelest designs? The third howl was barely a whimper, closer now, just beyond her door. Ilara's hand reached for the iron poker beside the fire. 5 winters alone had taught her caution. A wounded animal was a dangerous one, and whatever lurked outside her door was surely wounded. Foolishness, she muttered, even as she wrapped her cloak around her shoulders and lifted the wooden bar that secured her door. Complete foolishness. The wind nearly tore the door from her grasp as she opened it, sending snow swirling into her cottage. At first, she saw nothing. Then, as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she made out a large shape huddled against her porch steps, nearly buried in the fresh snowfall. A wolf, the largest she had ever seen. Its silver-gray coat was matted with blood that looked black in the dim light spilling from her doorway. One of its back legs was twisted at an unnatural angle, and something metal glinted against its flank. A trap, its vicious teeth still embedded in the creature's flesh. The wolf's amber eyes fixed on Ilara, pain and intelligence burning with equal measure in their depths. It made no move to attack, no sound beyond the shallow rasp of its labored breathing. Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door, to bar it tightly and pray the beast died before finding the strength to break through. But something in those eyes held her transfixed. A silent plea that transcended the ancient divide between human and wolf. "Oh, gods," she whispered, lowering the poker. "What has happened to you?" The wolf's only response was a faint whimper as it laid its massive head upon the snow, the fight visibly draining from its powerful body. Death's approach was unmistakable to a healer's eye. Without help, the creature would not survive the hour, let alone the night. Ilara closed her eyes, thinking of the villagers' warnings. The wolves are not like other beasts, the elders cautioned. They remember those who harm them, and those who help. Opening her eyes, she made her choice. "Stay still," she told the wolf, as if it could understand. "I need to fetch supplies." Leaving the door open, she hurried to gather what she needed. Her strongest herbs, clean linen, a small pot of salve, and her sharpest blade. Her mind calculated what a wolf of that size would need compared to a human. More yarrow to staunch bleeding, a stronger sleeping draught to dull the pain. When she returned to the door, the wolf hadn't moved, though its amber eyes tracked her movements with eerie awareness. Ilara knelt in the snow beside it, close enough to feel the heat radiating from its massive body, close enough for it to tear her throat out with a single lunge. "I'm going to help you," she said softly, meeting its gaze. "But that trap needs to come off first." Her hands trembled as she reached toward the cruel metal device clamped around the wolf's hindquarter. The creature tensed but made no move to stop her, its breathing quickening with fear or anticipation. Ilara couldn't tell which. The trap was a hunter's tool, designed to hold prey without killing it immediately. Its release mechanism had been damaged, either by the wolf's struggles or deliberate tampering. "This will hurt," she warned, positioning her blade at the joint where the trap's spring mechanism connected. "I'm sorry." With a swift, sure movement, she severed the spring. The wolf's body convulsed, a low growl rumbling from its chest. Ilara braced herself for an attack, but it merely laid its head back down, eyes never leaving her face. Working quickly, she removed the remaining pieces of the trap, finally freeing the creature's mangled leg. Blood flowed freely now, and Ilara pressed a cloth soaked in yarrow extract against the wound. "You're lucky," she murmured, examining the injury. "The trap caught mostly flesh. Your bones will heal if infection doesn't set in." The wolf watched her with those impossible eyes as she worked, cleaning the wound, applying salve, and finally wrapping the leg in clean linen. Throughout her ministrations, it remained unnaturally still, as if understanding the necessity of her touch. When she finished, Ilara sat back on her heels, suddenly aware of the cold seeping through her clothes, the snow melting against her skin. "You can't stay out here," she said, glancing at her small cottage door. "And I can't move you alone." The wolf's ears twitched, and to Ilara's astonishment it struggled to stand, favoring its injured leg. It swayed, unsteady but determined. "No, don't," she began. But the wolf had already taken a halting step toward her door, leaving a trail of bloody prints in the snow. Ilara scrambled to her feet, backing away to give it space. Part of her screamed that she was inviting death into her home, that a wounded predator was the most dangerous kind. But another part, the healer in her, couldn't bear to leave any creature to suffer in the killing cold. "Slowly," she cautioned, moving to support its massive shoulder as the wolf limped across her threshold. Just there, by the fire. The wolf collapsed onto the rug before her hearth, its massive form taking up nearly half her small sitting room. Ilara quickly closed the door against the storm, sealing them together in the cottage's dim warmth. Only then did the full weight of what she'd done crash over her. She had invited a wolf, a creature of tooth and claw, of wild hunger and ancient enmity, into her home. The beast could kill her in an instant if it chose. And yet, as she looked at it lying there, eyes half closed with exhaustion, she felt not fear, but a strange kinship. They were both outcasts, weren't they? Both alone against the storm. "Rest now," she told it softly, adding wood to the fire. "Morning will tell whether I've saved your life or sealed my fate." The wolf's amber eyes closed fully then, its massive chest rising and falling in the deepening rhythm of sleep. Ilara settled into her chair, the iron poker across her lap. She would not sleep this night. But as the hours passed and the blizzard raged on, she found herself studying the silver-gray fur gleaming in the firelight, the powerful muscles relaxed in slumber, the strange nobility in the creature's features. It was beautiful, in a wild, terrible way, and something about it, something in those knowing eyes, whispered of secrets she couldn't begin to fathom. Dawn found her still watching, wondering what consequence the morning light would bring. Dawn broke with hesitant fingers of light stretching through Alara's frost-laced windows. She had not slept, her vigil unbroken through the longest night she could remember. The fire had burned low, and the cottage held the peculiar stillness that follows a great storm, a hush that seemed to suspend the world between moments. The wolf still slept, its massive form curled before her hearth. In the pale morning light, Alara could better see the true silver of its coat, the way the fur shimmered like polished metal with each breath. No common forest wolf, this. It was too large, its features too refined, bearing a regal quality she had never observed in the occasional wolves that prowled the village edges during harsh winters. Moving silently, Alara rose from her chair, muscles protesting after hours of tense immobility. She needed to check the bandages, to see if infection had set in overnight, if the creature allowed it. "Please stay asleep," she whispered, inching closer. The wolf's eyes snapped open. Alara froze, her heart thundering against her ribs. Those eyes, amber as harvest honey, clear and piercing with an intelligence no beast should possess, fixed upon her with unnerving focus. "I need to check your wounds," she explained, keeping her voice level despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I won't hurt you." To her astonishment, the wolf shifted, extending its injured leg toward her as if understanding her words perfectly. Alara blinked, momentarily disoriented by this impossible comprehension, before caution reasserted itself. "Thank you," she murmured, kneeling beside the creature. The bandages were soaked with blood, but not as badly as she had feared. Carefully, she unwrapped the linen, bracing for any sudden movement from her patient. None came. The wolf remained still, watching her work with that same eerie attentiveness. "The bleeding has slowed," she observed, examining the wound. "No sign of putrefaction yet. You heal quickly." She applied fresh salve and clean bandages, aware of the wolf's steady gaze following her every movement. When she finished, she sat back on her heels, studying the creature openly. "What are you?" she asked softly. No ordinary wolf comes to a human for help. The wolf's ears pricked forward at her words, and something like amusement seemed to flicker in its eyes. Then, without warning, it struggled to its feet. Alara scrambled backward, reaching for her forgotten poker, but the wolf made no move toward her. Instead, it limped to the center of her small cottage, standing tall despite its injury. What happened next would haunt Alara's dreams for years to come. The air around the wolf seemed to shimmer, like heat rising from summer stones. Its outline blurred, the silver fur rippling as if disturbed by an invisible wind. There was a sound, not quite a crack, not quite a sigh, and where the wolf had stood, a man now knelt. Alara's scream died in her throat, strangled by shock. The man, naked but for the bandage still wrapped around his thigh, slowly rose to his full height. He was tall, powerfully built, with the same silver-streaked dark hair as the wolf's coat. His features were sharp, aristocratic, and his eyes, the same impossible amber, regarded her with a mixture of pain and what might have been gratitude. "My thanks, healer," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the small cottage. Few would have shown such mercy to a predator at their door. Alara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Shapeshifters were the stuff of children's tales, of fireside stories meant to frighten the young into obedience. They weren't real, couldn't be real. And yet, "What? Who are you?" she finally managed, her voice barely a whisper. The man's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "You do not recognize your king, healer?" The blood drained from Alara's face. King Darius, the Alpha King who had united the 7 packs under his iron rule 5 years ago, the monarch whose name was spoken in fearful whispers, whose judgments were as swift as they were merciless, the king whom no one in Wolfhaven, a tiny village at the edge of his vast territories, had ever actually seen. "My king," she stammered, dropping into an awkward curtsy. I never thought." "Few do," he interrupted, his gaze moving around her small cottage with sharp assessment. "Your name, healer?" "Alara," Your Majesty." He nodded once, as if committing it to memory. "You have skill, Alara. The trap that caught me was designed for my kind, silver-laced and spelled to prevent shifting. Only after the mechanism broke could I begin to change back." Alara struggled to process his words. Silver-laced, spelled, designed specifically for his kind. Someone had deliberately set a trap for a shapeshifter, for the king himself. An assassination attempt. She breathed, the implications sending a chill through her that had nothing to do with the winter cold. King Darius's expression hardened. "Yes, and had you not intervened, it would have succeeded." His eyes narrowed. "Why did you help me? You must have known the danger." The question caught Alara off guard. Why had she helped a wounded predator that could have killed her with a single bite? The answer came without thought, simple and true. "Because you were suffering," she said softly. "And I am a healer. That's all there is to it." Something flickered in the king's amber eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. He studied her face as if searching for deceit, and finding none. The moment shattered at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Many horses, moving fast. Darius tensed, moving with surprising agility to the window despite his injury. "My guards," he said, peering through the frost-laced glass. "They've been tracking me since the attack." Alara felt a flood of relief. The king would leave with his men, and her life would return to its quiet solitude. This strange interlude would become just another secret held within her cottage walls. But when Darius turned back to her, his expression was unreadable. "You will attend me at the castle," he said, the words clearly in order rather than a request. "What? No, I can't," Alara protested, panic flaring. "My place is here. The villagers need— Your king needs you." Darius cut her off, his tone brooking no argument. "The wound requires further care, and I would not entrust it to the court physicians, not when treachery may lurk in my own halls." Before Alara could object further, the cottage door burst open. 5 armored men entered, hands on sword hilts, eyes widening at the scene before them. Their king, naked and wounded in a peasant healer's home. "Your Majesty," the lead guard dropped to one knee, the others quickly following suit. "We've been searching since the ambush. Are you well?" "Well enough, thanks to this healer," Darius replied. "Rise, Gareth. We return to the castle immediately, and the healer comes with us." The guard, Gareth, flicked a curious glance at Alara before nodding. "As you command, sire." Events moved with dizzying speed after that. A guard produced clothing for the king from a saddlebag. Another informed Alara she had 10 minutes to gather whatever she needed. There was no further opportunity to protest, no moment to explain that she never ventured beyond the forest's edge, that the thought of the castle with its crowds and politics made her throat close with panic. Before she fully comprehended what was happening, Alara found herself atop a horse, her meager possessions, herbs, instruments, a change of clothes, stuffed into saddlebags. King Darius rode beside her, his face a mask of regal indifference now that they were surrounded by his men. As they crested the hill above Wolfhaven, Alara looked back at her cottage, her sanctuary, growing smaller in the distance. Smoke still curled from its chimney, a thin gray line against the snow-blanketed forest. Would she ever see it again? "Your village will manage without you for a time," Darius said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "My need is greater." Alara turned to him, finding his amber eyes fixed upon her with that same unnerving intensity. "And when will I be permitted to return, Your Majesty?" Something passed across his features, a fleeting expression she couldn't interpret. "When I decree it," he said simply. They rode in silence after that, the guards forming a protective circle around them as they traveled roads Alara had never seen, through forests deeper and darker than her own. By midday, the landscape changed, forests giving way to rolling hills, and finally to the sprawling plains surrounding the royal city of Lunarhold. Alara had heard tales of the city since childhood, of its stone walls that gleamed silver in the moonlight, of the castle that crowned its central hill like a howling wolf with spires for teeth. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of it rising before her, vast and imposing against the winter sky. The common folk stopped to stare as the royal party passed through the city gates. Whispers followed them. The king returned unexpectedly, with a strange woman in tow. Alara kept her eyes downcast, overwhelmed by the press of buildings, the noise, the sheer number of people crowding the streets. By the time they reached the castle, her hands trembled on the reins, and she felt lightheaded with anxiety. "Breathe, healer," Darius murmured as they dismounted in the castle courtyard. "No harm will come to you here. You have my protection." His words should have comforted her. Instead, they sent a chill down her spine. The king's protection came with a price. She was sure of it. Nothing in her life had ever been freely given. A steward appeared, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, we had no word of your return. The council awaits your presence in the Great Hall. There are urgent matters." "Later," Darius cut him off. "See that the healer is given appropriate quarters near my own. She attends to my injury and is not to be disturbed." The steward's eyes widened fractionally as he took in Ilara's simple clothes, her untamed hair, the wild look in her eyes. "Of course, sire," he said, recovering quickly. "This way, mistress." Ilara hesitated, suddenly reluctant to be separated from the only person she knew in this vast, strange place, even if that person was the intimidating king himself. "Go," Darius told her, his voice gentler than she had yet heard it. "Rest. Eat. I will send for you when the council meeting concludes." She nodded mutely and followed the steward into the labyrinthine castle, feeling the weight of curious stares from guards and servants alike. The corridors seemed endless, each turn bringing new halls, new doors, new impossibilities to remember. Finally, the steward stopped before an ornately carved door. "Your chambers, mistress," he said, pushing it open with a small bow. Ilara stepped inside and nearly gasped. The room was larger than her entire cottage, with a massive four-poster bed, fine tapestries covering stone walls, a private bathing chamber, and a balcony overlooking snow-covered gardens. A fire already blazed in the hearth, warming the space to a comfortable glow. "This can't be right," she said, turning to the steward. "I'm just a village healer." The man's expression remained professionally blank. "His Majesty ordered you be given quarters befitting a royal physician. If there is anything you require, pull the bell cord, and a servant will attend you." He paused. "Bath water has been ordered, and," his eyes flicked over her simple dress, "suitable attire will be provided." With that, he bowed again and left, closing the door behind him. Ilara stood in the center of the opulent room, feeling more out of place than she ever had in her life. 24 hours ago, she had been alone in her cottage, counting herbs and listening to the storm. Now she was in the royal castle, awaiting the summons of a king who could transform into a wolf. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in her throat. She pressed her hands to her mouth to contain it, afraid that once started, she might not be able to stop. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. At her hesitant "enter," 3 serving women appeared, carrying steaming buckets of water and fresh linens. "For your bath, mistress," the eldest said, directing the others toward the bathing chamber. "And Lady Moira has sent these garments for you to wear, until proper ones can be made." Ilara watched in bewildered silence as they filled the copper tub, laid out soaps and oils, and arranged an emerald green dress across the bed. It was finer than anything she had ever owned or even touched. Silk and velvet, with delicate silver embroidery at collar and cuffs. "I can't wear that," she protested weakly. "It's too fine. I'm just His Majesty's personal healer," the woman finished for her, a knowing look in her eye. "And in the castle, appearances matter. Now, would you like assistance with your bath?" Ilara shook her head quickly. "No, thank you. I can manage." When they finally left, she approached the steaming tub as if it might bite her. The water was hot, a luxury she rarely afforded herself at home, where every bucket had to be heated individually over her small fire. Scented oils shimmered on its surface, filling the air with the fragrance of lavender and rosemary. Slowly, she disrobed and sank into the bath, a small moan escaping her lips as the heat enveloped her aching body. The tension of the night's vigil, the shock of the morning's revelations, the anxiety of the journey, all seemed to dissolve in the fragrant water. As she bathed, Ilara's mind whirled with questions. Why had the king been traveling alone, vulnerable to ambush? Who would dare attempt to assassinate him? And most puzzling of all, why bring her, a village healer of no consequence, to the royal castle? There was more to this than a simple leg wound. Of that, she was certain. After her bath, Ilara reluctantly donned the borrowed dress, surprised to find it fit reasonably well. The fabric felt strange against her skin, too soft, too fine for someone accustomed to homespun wool and linen. She felt like an imposter, a wild creature dressed in finery it had no right to wear. A tray of food awaited her, fresh bread, cheese, roasted meats, and wine. She ate sparingly, too nervous for appetite, and then paced the confines of her gilded cage, waiting for the king's summons. It came sooner than expected. A sharp knock, and then Gareth, the guard captain, stood at her door. "His Majesty requires your presence, healer," he said, eyes carefully averted from her transformed appearance. Elara smoothed trembling hands over the unfamiliar dress. "Lead the way, Captain." As they traversed the castle's winding corridors once more, Elara gathered her courage. She would demand answers. She would insist on returning to her village as soon as the king's wound was properly treated. She would not allow herself to be swept along by events beyond her control. But when Gareth led her not to the king's private chambers as expected, but to the great hall itself, her resolve faltered. The massive doors swung open, revealing a cavernous space filled with courtiers, nobles, and guards, hundreds of eyes turning toward her as she entered. At the far end, upon a dais, sat King Darius on his throne of polished black stone and silver. Even from a distance, his amber eyes found hers unerringly, pinning her in place with their hypnotic intensity. "Come forward, healer," his voice carried effortlessly across the hushed hall. "Your king has need of you." And with those words, Elara knew her life would never be the same again. Alara's footsteps echoed in the cavernous silence of the great hall. Each step toward the dais felt like an eternity, the weight of hundreds of curious stares pressing down upon her shoulders. The emerald dress, so foreign to her skin, rustled with each movement, announcing her presence in a way her simple healer's garb never would have. The court was a sea of finery and calculated elegance. Women with elaborate hairstyles adorned with silver and gems. Men in tailored doublets bearing the insignia of noble houses. All watching, all judging. As Elara approached the throne, she could better see King Darius now. He had exchanged the simple traveling clothes from earlier for royal attire. A fitted black tunic with silver embroidery, a deep blue cloak fastened with a wolf's head brooch, and a crown of twisted silver that resembled thorns, or perhaps fangs. Despite the finery, she noted how he shifted his weight subtly to favor his injured leg. She stopped at the foot of the dais and dropped into what she hoped was an acceptable curtsy, keeping her eyes lowered as was proper. Her heart thundered so loudly, she was certain everyone in the hall could hear it. "Rise, Elara of Wolfhaven," Darius commanded. She straightened, finally daring to lift her gaze to his face. The king's expression was unreadable, his amber eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. "You stand before the court of Lunarhold," he continued, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Many here have heard how I was set upon by assassins during my travels. What they do not yet know is that when I lay wounded and dying in the storm, it was you who saved my life." A murmur rippled through the assembled courtiers. Elara felt her cheeks flush with heat. This was not what she had expected, to be put on display, to become the subject of court gossip and speculation. "Your Majesty," she began quietly, "I merely did what any healer would." "Any healer?" Darius interrupted, one eyebrow rising. "I think not. Any healer might have barred their door against a predator. Any healer might have loosed an arrow rather than offer aid. You showed courage where others would have shown fear, compassion where others would have shown cruelty." His words hung in the air, and Elara couldn't help but wonder at their purpose. Was this praise genuine? Or was she a piece being maneuvered on some political game board she couldn't even see? "For such service to the crown," Darius continued, "there must be reward. Step forward, Elara of Wolfhaven." A cold knot of dread formed in her stomach. She had not helped him for reward, had not wanted anything except perhaps to return to her cottage, to her simple life. Nevertheless, she climbed the 3 steps to stand before the throne. Darius rose, towering over her, his presence seeming to fill the entire dais. From a nearby cushion, he lifted something that glinted in the torchlight, a circlet of silver, delicate and beautiful, set with small moonstones that caught and reflected the light. "By right of royal decree," he said, his voice taking on a formal cadence, "I name you royal healer to the throne of Lunarhold. You shall attend the king's person in matters of health and healing, with all the privileges and responsibilities thereof." Before Elara could react, he placed the circlet upon her head. It was surprisingly light, but she felt its weight in meaning if not in substance. "Furthermore," Darius continued, and something in his tone made Elara's breath catch, "at the next full moon, 3 nights hence, Ilara of Wolfhaven shall become my queen." The hall erupted into chaos. Ilara stood frozen, certain she had misheard. The king's words seemed to echo around her, disconnected from reality. Queen? Her? A village healer with no family name, no connections, no political value whatsoever? It was madness. Through the roaring in her ears, she became aware of the reactions around her. Shock on most faces, outrage on others, and from a cluster of richly dressed women to her right, expressions of such hatred that Ilara nearly flinched away. "Your Majesty," she whispered urgently. "I don't understand." "You will," he replied, his voice pitched for her ears alone. Then, louder, to the still murmuring court, "Let it be known throughout the 7 territories that King Darius has chosen his mate. Preparations for the royal mating ceremony will begin immediately." A tall man with streaks of gray in his dark hair stepped forward from among the courtiers. His fine clothing and the silver medallion at his throat marked him as someone of importance. "Your Majesty," the man said, his tone carefully neutral though his eyes flashed with barely concealed anger. "The Council of Elders would request private audience regarding this unexpected announcement." Darius's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Lord Thorn, your concern is noted. The council may attend me in 1 hour. For now, the court is dismissed." With visible reluctance, the assembled nobles began to disperse, their whispers growing louder as they moved toward the great doors. Ilara remained rooted to the spot, her mind still struggling to process what had just happened. "Come," Darius said, touching her elbow lightly. "There are matters we must discuss privately." He guided her through a side door behind the throne, into a smaller chamber furnished with a round table and several chairs. A fire burned in the hearth, and tapestries depicting hunting scenes covered the stone walls. As soon as the door closed behind them, Ilara rounded on him. "What was that?" she demanded, forgetting protocol in her shock. How could you possibly—" "Sit," Darius said, gesturing to a chair. When she remained standing, defiance in her posture, something like amusement flickered in his eyes. "Please." Reluctantly, Ilara sat, removing the circlet from her head and placing it on the table with trembling hands. "Your Majesty, I cannot be your queen. It's impossible. I'm a common healer, with no noble blood, no education in court matters. The people would never accept it." Darius took the seat opposite her, studying her face with that same intense gaze that seemed to pierce through all defenses. "The people will accept whatever their king decrees," he said simply. "As for noble blood," his lips curled in what might have been disdain, "I have found little correlation between noble birth and noble character. But surely there are suitable candidates," Ilara pressed. "Noble women raised for such a position. Women who would bring political alliances, wealth, connections. All things I already possess in abundance," he interrupted. "What I lack is someone I can trust." The word hung between them, heavy with implication. "And you trust me?" Ilara asked incredulously. "A woman you've known for less than a day?" Darius leaned forward, his amber eyes never leaving hers. "You held my life in your hands when I was at my most vulnerable. You tended my wounds without knowing who or what I was. And when you discovered my identity, your behavior did not change." He paused. "Do you know how rare that is? To be seen as I am, not as my crown defines me?" There was something in his voice, a loneliness, perhaps, that caught at Ilara's heart, despite her bewilderment. Still, this was madness. "There must be another way," she insisted. "If you need a royal healer, I will serve. If you need someone you can trust, I am honored. But marriage is politically expedient." Darius finished for her. "The attempt on my life was not random, Ilara. It was carefully planned, executed with knowledge of my movements and habits. It speaks of treachery close to the throne." He rose, moving to stand before the fire, his profile sharp against the dancing flames. "For 5 years, I have ruled the 7 territories through strength and fear. I united the packs that had warred for generations. But unity built on fear is a fragile thing. There are those who would see me fall, who plot even now to fracture what I have built." Ilara watched him, beginning to understand the weight he carried. "And taking a queen helps you how, exactly?" Darius turned back to her. "It gives me an ally bound by the most sacred ties our kind recognizes. It creates stability in the line of succession, and it shows strength, that I can secure my rule even in the face of assassination attempts." "But why me?" Ilara asked, the question that had been burning since his announcement. I bring you nothing but my healing skills. You bring loyalty untainted by ambition, he countered. A rare commodity in these halls. His expression softened marginally. You also bring compassion, something my rule has perhaps lacked. Ilara shook her head, overwhelmed. I have no choice in this, do I? There is always choice, Darius said quietly. Say no, and I will name you royal healer as promised, with lands and title to match the position. You will never want for anything again. Relief flooded through Ilara, followed immediately by suspicion. And if I refuse to be queen, what happens then? Something dangerous flickered in the king's eyes. Then I must look elsewhere for a mate. Perhaps Lady Alessia, whose father controls the eastern territories, or Lady Sarah, whose brothers command the largest army outside my own. Political marriages, Ilara murmured. Alliances that would inevitably shift power away from the crown, Darius corrected. Women raised to advance their family's ambitions, not to rule wisely or well. Ilara stood, needing to move, to think. This is too much. Yesterday I was tending herbs in my cottage. Today you ask me to help rule 7 territories. She paced the small chamber, the fine dress swishing around her ankles. I know nothing of politics or court intrigue. I would be useless to you as a queen. You would learn, Darius said with surprising gentleness. And perhaps your very ignorance of court politics is an advantage. You would see with fresh eyes what others have become blind to. A knock at the door interrupted them. Gareth entered, bowing deeply. Your Majesty, the Council of Elders awaits your presence in the council chamber. Darius nodded. Inform them I will join them shortly. When the guard had gone, he turned back to Ilara. Think on what I have said. We will speak again after I have dealt with the council. They'll try to dissuade you, Ilara said, gesturing vaguely toward the door. The nobles, the council, they'll tell you I'm unsuitable. Undoubtedly, Darius agreed, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. They have spent years attempting to maneuver their daughters and sisters into my bed. This announcement has upended many carefully laid plans. Then perhaps you should listen to them, Ilara suggested, though part of her recoiled at the thought of him taking one of those cold-eyed court ladies as his mate. Darius stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could catch the wild scent of him, pine and wood smoke and something uniquely his own. I have listened to advisors and counsels for 5 years, Ilara, he said softly. Perhaps it is time I listened to my instincts instead. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Ilara alone with her tumultuous thoughts. She was not permitted to return to her chambers. Instead, a stern-faced woman introduced as Lady Moira escorted Ilara to a new suite of rooms, the Queen's chambers, unoccupied since the death of Darius's mother 15 years earlier. These will require airing and updating, of course, Lady Moira said, surveying the dust-covered furniture with a critical eye. But they should serve until the mating ceremony. Ilara wandered the vast rooms in a daze, a bedchamber larger than her entire cottage, a private sitting room with windows overlooking the castle gardens, a bathing chamber with a tub that could fit 3 people, all draped in faded blue and silver, the colors of the royal house. I can't stay here, she said, turning to Lady Moira. It's too much. The older woman's expression softened fractionally. The king has chosen you, child. Whatever your feelings on the matter, that fact remains. You would do well to accept it with grace. But I'm not. Ilara gestured helplessly at herself, at the fine dress that could not disguise her common origins. I don't belong here. Anyone can see that. Lady Moira studied her for a long moment. Perhaps that is precisely why he chose you, she said finally. Now, servants will be sent to prepare these rooms. In the meantime, there are matters we must attend to if you are to be presented as queen in 3 days' time. What followed was a whirlwind of activity that left Ilara's head spinning. Seamstresses arrived to measure her for new gowns. A tutor was summoned to begin instructing her in court protocol and the complex histories of the noble houses. Servants appeared with trays of food she barely touched, her appetite lost to anxiety. By evening, when she was finally left alone, Ilara felt as if she might shatter from the strain of it all. She stood at the window, watching the moon rise over the snow-covered city below, and allowed herself to feel the full weight of her fear. She did not belong here, in this world of intrigue and power. She belonged in her forest cottage, with her herbs and potions, Her simple life where the greatest decisions she faced were which remedies to prepare for the changing seasons. And yet, a soft knock interrupted her thoughts. When she called "Enter," expecting yet another servant with yet another overwhelming task, she was startled to find King Darius himself in her doorway. He had shed his formal attire for simpler clothes, a black tunic and trousers that emphasized his powerful build. Without the crown, with his dark hair falling loose around his face, he looked younger, less forbidding. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the room beyond. Elara nodded, suddenly conscious of her own dishevelment. She had removed the fine dress as soon as she was alone, retreating to the simple shift she had packed in her saddlebag. Her hair, elaborately arranged earlier by a lady's maid, had been freed to tumble wild around her shoulders. "How did your meeting with the council go?" she asked, needing to break the silence that stretched between them. A wry smile touched his lips. "As expected, they presented numerous reasons why I should reconsider. Questioned your lineage, your education, your suitability for the role. Lord Thorne was particularly vocal in his opposition. The older man from court," Elara remembered. "He seemed displeased." "Thorne had hopes of seeing his daughter as queen," Darius said, moving to stand beside her at the window. "He has cultivated those hopes for years, despite my lack of interest." Elara studied his profile in the moonlight, finding herself drawn to the strong lines of his face, the quiet power he exuded even at rest. "And did they persuade you?" she asked softly. "To reconsider?" Darius turned to her, his amber eyes reflecting the silvery light. "I am not easily swayed once my mind is set," he said. "The question remains, however. Have you decided?" Elara took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I have questions first, if I may." He inclined his head, granting permission. "You said the assassins specifically targeted you as a shapeshifter," she began. "Who would have both the knowledge and the means for such an attack?" A shadow passed across Darius's features. "Someone who knows I travel alone during the full moon. Someone with access to silver and the rare herbs used in the spell that prevented my shifting." He paused. "Someone within my inner circle. Hence your need for a queen you can trust." Elara nodded slowly. "But there must be others you trust. Friends from before you were king. Family, perhaps." "I have ruled for 5 years, healer," Darius said, a hardness entering his voice. "Do you know what that time has taught me? That loyalty purchased with coin or favor is no loyalty at all. That friends become sycophants when one wears a crown. That family can be the most dangerous betrayers of all." There was a bitterness in his words that spoke of personal pain, of lessons learned at great cost. Elara felt a sudden, unexpected surge of compassion for this man who had everything, and yet, perhaps, nothing at all. "And what of the mating bond?" she asked, moving to the heart of her concerns. "Among your kind, it is sacred, is it not? Meant to be formed between true mates, not political allies." Darius's expression turned guarded. "You know of our ways." "I have treated shapeshifters before," Elara explained. "Village folk who live quiet lives, hiding what they are. They speak of the mating bond as something rare and precious." "It is," he agreed. "But royal matches have seldom been made for love or true compatibility. The needs of the kingdom must come first, even at the cost of never finding your true mate," Elara pressed. "Of binding yourself to someone who can never fulfill that deepest connection?" Something flickered in Darius's eyes. A brief vulnerability quickly masked. "True mates are largely a myth, Elara. A story told to give hope to the common folk. In 5 centuries of recorded history, the royal line has documented fewer than a dozen such pairings." Elara wasn't certain she believed him. The shapeshifters she had known spoke of the bond with such reverence, such longing, but she nodded, accepting his words for now. "One last question," she said quietly. "What happens if I say yes? Not the ceremony, not the politics, but to me. What changes?" Darius stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the wild scent that was uniquely his. "Everything," he said simply, "and nothing. You would be queen, with all the power and responsibility that entails. You would stand at my side in ruling the 7 territories. You would be my mate in every sense of the word." The implication sent heat rushing to Elara's cheeks. She wasn't naive. She knew what happened between mates, between husband and wife. But the thought of such intimacy with this man, this powerful, dangerous stranger who was offering her a crown, "And if I say no?" she whispered. "Then, as I promised, you will be royal healer," Darius replied, his voice softening. "Protected and provided for, but free to refuse the crown and all it entails." Elara searched his face, looking for deceit, for manipulation, for the trap she was certain must exist. She found none, only that same intense gaze that seemed to see through all her defenses. "I need time," she said finally. "This is too much to decide in a single day." Darius nodded, stepping back. "You have until tomorrow evening," he said. "After that, I must announce either our betrothal or my intention to seek another mate. The kingdom cannot afford uncertainty, not with enemies circling." He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. "Whatever you decide, Elara of Wolfhaven, know this. I did not save you from your village out of mere gratitude or political calculation. There was something in you, something I recognized from the moment you opened your door to a wounded wolf in the storm. Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, leaving Elara alone with the moonlight, her questions, and the impossible choice that lay before her. Dawn painted the castle walls with gold when Elara woke, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar luxury surrounding her. Reality rushed back as her fingers brushed silk sheets. The king's proposal, the court's shock, her looming decision. She had until evening to answer. To accept a crown she never sought or become merely the royal healer, still trapped within these walls, but without the power a queen might wield. Elara moved to the window, watching the city below stir to life. Merchants opened stalls in the lower squares. Guards changed at the towers. Ordinary people began their day, unaware that a simple village healer stood above them, contemplating a choice that would alter the kingdom's future. What would her mother have said? Taken by fever when Elara was 12, she had been a practical woman, teaching her daughter the healing arts. "Your gift is healing, little one," she would say. "Never forget that." Would becoming queen allow her to heal on a greater scale? Or would palace intrigues consume her, twisting her into someone she no longer recognized? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Lady Moira entered, her stern face set in its usual lines, followed by 2 serving women carrying trays. "You are awake." "Good," she said briskly. "There is much to do today, regardless of your decision." Elara raised an eyebrow. "You know about the choice he gave me?" "The king confides in me on certain matters," Lady Moira replied. "I have served 3 generations of the royal family. My loyalty is beyond question." Elara studied her more carefully. "You don't approve of me as his choice." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "It is not my place to approve or disapprove of my king's decisions." She dismissed the servants before continuing. "But since you ask, no, I would not have chosen you. You are untrained in court matters, unknown to the nobility, and unprepared for the dangers you would face as queen. Then why help me? Why not sabotage me, as I'm sure others are planning to do? Because he chose you. And in 30 years at court, I have never seen King Darius, or Prince Darius before him, act on impulse. If he believes you are what the kingdom needs, I will do everything in my power to ensure you succeed." She paused. "Whether that success comes as queen or royal healer is for you to decide." With that, she gestured to the trays. "Eat, then we will continue your lessons and protocol. The king has arranged for you to observe the morning council session, an unprecedented honor for one not yet crowned." Elara's heart beat faster. The council chamber, where she might see firsthand what becoming queen would truly mean. "Then I had better prepare myself," she said, straightening her shoulders. The council chamber was an octagonal room with a round table at its center. Maps covered the walls, marking the territories of the 7 pacts that formed the United Kingdom. A large fireplace kept the space warm, despite the winter chill seeping through stone walls. Elara stood behind a decorative screen at the chamber's edge, hidden from the council members' view, but able to observe through gaps in the carved wood. Lady Moira had positioned her there with strict instructions not to reveal her presence. 6 men and 1 woman were already seated when King Darius entered. They rose immediately, bowing as he took his place at the head of the table. Elara recognized Lord Thorne among them, his expression carefully neutral despite the anger she had sensed from him the day before. "Be seated," Darius commanded. "There is much to discuss today." What followed was a detailed review of kingdom matters: tax collection in the northern territories, reports of bandits along eastern trade routes, negotiations with neighboring realms. Ilara listened with growing fascination as each council member presented their area of responsibility, and Darius asked pointed questions that revealed his thorough understanding of even minor details. This was rulership, she realized. Not the pageantry of court, but this methodical management of 1,000 interlocking concerns that affected countless lives. Nearly an hour passed before Lord Thorn cleared his throat, interrupting a discussion of grain storage. "If I may, Your Majesty," he said, his tone deferential, though his eyes were hard. "There is the matter of your announcement yesterday. The nobility is in quite an uproar." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Darius's expression remained impassive, but Ilara noted how the other council members shifted in their seats, glances darting between king and councillor. "The succession is hardly a matter for the nobility to be in uproar about," Darius replied coolly. "My choice of mate is my own." "Of course, sire," Thorn conceded with a slight bow of his head. "Yet tradition dictates consideration of political alliances, bloodlines, the stability of the realm, all of which I have considered." Darius cut him off. "The healer saved my life when your daughter and the other noble ladies were safely ensconced in their manor houses. She has proven her loyalty, her courage, and her skill." "A commoner on the throne," the lone woman counselor spoke up, her voice carefully neutral. "It is unprecedented." "So was the unification of the 7 packs," Darius countered. "Yet here we sit, 5 years later, in the longest period of peace our territories have known in generations." A younger man, dark-haired and lean, with a scholar's ink-stained fingers, spoke up. "If I may, Your Majesty, while Lady Sarah is correct that a commoner queen is unprecedented, there might be certain advantages to such a choice. The common folk have long viewed the throne as distant from their concerns," he continued when Darius nodded. "A queen who understands their struggles firsthand could bridge that gap, and her skills as a healer would be seen as a compliment to Your Majesty's more martial attributes." "A pretty theory, Lord Kalen," Thorn scoffed. "But the reality is that the noble houses will never accept her. They will see her elevation as an insult to their daughters, their sisters. They will accept what their king decrees," Darius said, his voice hardening. "As will you, Lord Thorn." The threat lingered in the air, unspoken, but unmistakable. Ilara watched as Thorn's face paled, then flushed with anger he dared not express. "Of course, Your Majesty," he said stiffly. "I merely counsel caution. These are dangerous times, with enemies both known and hidden." "Which brings us to the matter of the assassination attempt," Darius said, shifting the discussion. "Lord Valerian, what has your investigation uncovered?" A broad-shouldered man with silver at his temples leaned forward. "Little of substance, I fear. The trap was well crafted, using rare components that could have come from any of a dozen sources. The location suggests knowledge of Your Majesty's movements, but that narrows the field only slightly." "Not slightly enough," Darius said grimly. "The culprit could be anyone with access to the royal schedule. A servant, a guard, perhaps even someone in this very room." Tension crackled through the chamber as council members exchanged glances, sudden suspicion flaring between them. Ilara watched their faces carefully, searching for signs of guilt or fear, but saw only the careful masks of seasoned courtiers. "Increase the palace guard," Darius ordered, "and double the patrols along the forest roads. If there is another attempt, I want to be prepared." The council session continued, but Ilara's mind remained fixed on that exchange. The danger surrounding Darius was real, and by extension, would surround her if she accepted his proposal. Was she prepared for that? To live always looking over her shoulder, questioning every smile, every gesture of friendship? As the council members filed out, Darius remained seated, staring at the maps on the wall. When the door closed behind the last of them, he spoke without turning. "What did you learn, healer?" Ilara stepped out from behind the screen, startled, but not entirely surprised that he had known of her presence. "That ruling is far more complex than I imagined," she answered honestly, "and that your council fears you more than they love you." A ghost of a smile touched his lips as he finally turned to face her. "Fear is reliable. Love is not. A sad philosophy for a king," Ilara observed, "and a sadder one for a man." Something flickered in Darius's amber eyes, a brief vulnerability quickly masked. "Did my council's deliberations help clarify your decision?" he asked, changing the subject. Ilara studied the maps that detailed the kingdom's expanse. 7 territories, each once ruled by its own alpha, now united under Darius's crown. A fractious union at best, held together by strength of will, and yes, by fear. "I'm still considering," she said, "though I admit, watching you with them was illuminating." "They oppose my choice of you," Darius stated flatly. "Most of them," Alara agreed, though Lord Kalen seemed willing to consider the benefits. "Kalen is young. Idealistic," Darius said, though without the dismissal such words usually carried. "He sees potential where others see only tradition broken." "If I were to say yes," she began carefully, "what would you expect of me? As queen, I mean." Darius rose, moving to stand beside her at the map. "Loyalty above all. Beyond that," he gestured to the territories, "these lands need healing as much as I did when you found me in the storm. 5 years of peace has not erased generations of conflict. The wounds run deep." His shoulder brushed against hers, warm even through the fabric of her dress. Alara was suddenly aware of his physical presence, his height, his strength, the wild scent that clung to him even in human form. "You believe a healer can mend political divisions?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I believe you can," Darius said simply. "I've seen how you approach problems, not with force or fear, but with care and understanding. Perhaps that is what my rule has lacked." Before she could respond, the door burst open. Gareth, the guard captain, entered with his hand on his sword hilt, his expression grim. "Your Majesty," he said with a hurried bow. "There's been an incident. Lady Thorne has been found unconscious in her chambers. The royal physician suspects poison." Darius's face hardened instantly. "Lord Thorne's daughter?" Gareth nodded. "Yes, sire. She lives, but barely. And—" He hesitated, glancing at Alara. "Speak freely, Captain," Darius commanded. "The healer has my trust. A servant reported seeing someone leaving Lady Thorne's chambers shortly before she was found. Someone in a green dress, with long dark hair." Alara felt the blood drain from her face as both men turned to look at her. She was wearing a green dress now, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. "That's impossible," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been here, watching the council session." "A convenient alibi," Gareth observed, his hand tightening on his sword. Darius raised a hand, silencing him. "The healer has indeed been here throughout the council session. I can personally vouch for her presence." Relief flooded through Alara, followed immediately by a cold realization. "Someone is trying to frame me," she said, "to make it appear I would eliminate a rival for your hand." "So it would seem," Darius agreed, his expression darkening. "Captain, seal the castle. No one enters or leaves until we have answers. And double the guard on the healer's chambers. I want her protected at all times." Gareth bowed, though Alara noticed his suspicious gaze lingering on her before he departed. When they were alone again, Darius turned to her, his amber eyes burning with barely contained rage. "This changes things." "Yes," Alara agreed quietly. "It seems I've made enemies before I've even made my decision." "It was not your choice that made them enemies," Darius said grimly. "It was mine. And now they strike not at me directly, but at what they perceive as my weakness." "Me," Alara said, understanding dawning. "They think by discrediting or eliminating me, they can force you to choose a bride from among the noble houses." Darius nodded, his jaw tight with anger. "I underestimated their desperation. A mistake I will not make again." He paced the length of the chamber, his movements reminding Alara of the predator that lurked beneath his human skin. "Perhaps it would be safer for you to return to your village after all." The suggestion caught her by surprise. "You would let me go? Now?" He stopped, turning to face her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I would not see you harmed because of my choice, Alara. If your safety requires your departure, then so be it." There was a rawness in his voice that made her heart twist unexpectedly. This powerful, dangerous man, who ruled 7 territories with an iron will, was offering to release her, to sacrifice his own plans to ensure her safety. In that moment, something shifted within Alara. A decision crystallized, born not of the careful deliberation she had planned, but of sudden, clear insight. "No," she said firmly. "I will not be driven away by threats and schemes." Darius's eyebrows rose slightly. "You choose to stay, knowing the danger." "I choose to accept your proposal," Alara clarified. surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "I will be your queen, King Darius." He went very still, watching her with those penetrating amber eyes. "Why?" he asked simply. It was a fair question, one she was still answering for herself, but looking at him now, at the maps that detailed his kingdom, at the evidence of conspiracy unfolding around them, Elara found truth rising to her lips. "Because you need someone you can trust," she said, "and because I believe I can do more good as queen than as a village healer tending fevers and setting broken bones." She paused, gathering courage for her final admission. "And because there is something between us, something I don't fully understand yet, but something I want to explore." For a long moment, Darius simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. His hands cradled her face with surprising gentleness, his touch sending warmth cascading through her. "Elara of Wolfhaven," he said softly, his voice a low rumble that she felt as much as heard. "Do you freely consent to be my mate, my queen, to stand beside me in ruling these lands, from this day until our last?" The formal words of proposal carried a weight beyond their simple meaning. Elara knew that among shapeshifters, such a pledge was sacred, binding in ways that transcended human marriage. "I do," she replied, her heart racing as she sealed her fate. "From this day until our last." Darius's eyes gleamed, and for a heartbeat, Elara thought she glimpsed the wolf within him, wild and fierce, and utterly focused on her. Then his lips claimed hers, and thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. 3 nights later, Elara stood before a mirror in the queen's chambers, barely recognizing the woman reflected there. Gone was the simple village healer in homespun wool. In her place stood a queen-to-be, draped in silver silk that shimmered like moonlight with every breath, her dark hair adorned with tiny crystal stars. "It is time, my lady," Lady Moira said from the doorway, her usual stern expression softened by what might almost have been pride. Elara nodded, drawing a deep breath to steady her nerves. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of preparations, fittings for her ceremonial attire, lessons in the complex ritual that would bind her to Darius before the entire court, and increased security following the attempt to frame her for Lady Thorne's poisoning. The true culprit had been uncovered that morning, a servant paid by Lord Thorne himself to eliminate his daughter's rival and cast blame on Elara. The noble had been arrested, his desperate scheme exposed by his own co-conspirator when faced with the king's wrath. One threat neutralized, but Elara harbored no illusions that it would be the last. The path she had chosen was fraught with danger, yet as she followed Lady Moira through the castle corridors toward the great hall, she felt a strange calm settling over her. Whatever came, she would face it with the same courage she had shown that snowy night when she opened her door to a wounded wolf. The great hall had been transformed for the ceremony. Hundreds of candles bathed the space in golden light. Silver banners bearing the royal insignia hung from the rafters, and the assembled nobility and court officials created an aisle that led to the dais where Darius waited. He stood tall and imposing in formal attire of midnight blue and silver, his crown of thorns gleaming in the candlelight. But it was his eyes that captured Elara, amber and intense, fixed upon her with a heat that made her skin flush despite the hall's chill. Music swelled as she began her procession. With each step down the long aisle, Elara felt the weight of countless stares, some curious, some hostile, some calculating. She ignored them all, focusing only on the man who awaited her. When she reached the dais, Darius extended his hand. Elara took it, his warm fingers closing around hers with gentle strength. "You are certain?" he murmured, too softly for any but her to hear. In answer, Elara squeezed his hand and turned to face the royal priest who would conduct the ceremony. The ritual was ancient, dating back to when shapeshifters first formed packs and chose leaders. It spoke of bonds unbreakable, of strength shared, of loyalty unto death. As the priest intoned the sacred words, Darius and Elara exchanged vows that would bind them as mates, a connection deeper and more primal than mere human marriage. "With this mark I claim thee as mine," Darius said, the ritual words vibrating with power. "My strength is your shield, my territory your home, my life forfeit before harm comes to you. With this mark, I accept thy claim," Elara responded, the unfamiliar phrases feeling suddenly right on her tongue. "My loyalty is your foundation, my wisdom your counsel, my heart bound to yours until the last moon rises." Then came the moment Ilara had both anticipated and feared. Darius tilted his head, exposing the strong column of his throat, a gesture of trust and vulnerability from a predator born. Ilara leaned forward, pressing her lips to the pulse point at his neck, then, following instinct she hadn't known she possessed, bit down. The taste of his blood was copper and wild forest and something uniquely him. Power surged through her veins, a rush of connection that made her gasp against his skin. Now it was her turn. Ilara tilted her head, baring her neck to his teeth. Darius's eyes flashed gold, the wolf within him rising close to the surface at this primal moment. His lips brushed her skin, warm and unexpectedly gentle, before his teeth sank into the sensitive juncture where neck met shoulder. Pain flared briefly, then transformed into something else entirely, a flood of sensation that connected her to Darius in ways she couldn't have imagined. She felt his strength, his determination, the fierce protectiveness he harbored for his kingdom, and now, for her. The priest raised his hands, his voice ringing out across the hushed hall. "What has been joined this night, let no mortal power tear asunder. I present to you King Darius and Queen Ilara, rulers of the 7 territories, Alpha and Luna of the United Pax." The assembled court knelt as one, some willingly, some reluctantly, but all acknowledging the bond that now made Ilara their queen. Snow fell in gentle flakes outside the queen's balcony, gilded silver by the full moon's light. Ilara stood watching the silent transformation of the castle gardens below, wrapped in a fur-lined cloak against the winter chill. 1 month had passed since her coronation. 1 month of learning to be queen, of council meetings and court functions, of slowly establishing her place in this world so different from the one she had known. There had been challenges, of course, whispers behind her back, nobles who tested her authority, servants who doubted her competence. But there had been victories, too. A royal decree establishing healing centers in each territory, using her knowledge to bring care to those who had long done without. A successful negotiation with neighboring kingdoms, where her straightforward approach had cut through years of diplomatic posturing. "You should be resting," Darius's voice came from behind her, warm and familiar through their strengthening bond. "Tomorrow's journey will be long." Ilara turned, smiling as he joined her at the balcony rail. "I wanted to see the snow. It reminds me of the night we met." His hand covered hers, the heat of his skin a stark contrast to the cold stone beneath her fingers. "A fortunate storm," he murmured, his amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. "For both of us, it seems," Ilara agreed. The journey to her village scheduled for the morning would be her first return since leaving with the king's guard that fateful day. She had insisted on making the trip, on establishing the first royal healing center in Wolfhaven as a symbol of the changes her reign would bring. "Are you nervous?" Darius asked, reading her thoughts through the bond that grew stronger each day. "A little," she admitted. "They knew me as the strange healer who lived alone at the forest's edge. Now I return as their queen who remembers what it means to struggle, to hunger, to fear the winter's bite," Darius said, drawing her closer. "That is why they will follow you, Ilara. Not because of your crown, but because of who you are beneath it." She leaned into his embrace, still marveling at how natural it felt to be held by him, to share not just her body, but her thoughts, her fears, her hopes. The mating bond between them had deepened with each passing day, revealing new facets of the man she had pledged herself to. "What are you thinking?" he asked, nuzzling the mark on her neck. "That life takes strange turns," Ilara replied honestly. "A month ago I was gathering herbs in my cottage, wondering if my firewood would last the winter. Now I am queen of 7 territories, bonded to a shapeshifter king, planning to transform healthcare across the realm." Darius chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest against her back. "Disappointed? Terrified," she corrected, turning in his arms to face him. "Overwhelmed, but not disappointed. Never that." His expression softened as he traced the curve of her cheek with one finger. "When I was trapped in that hunter's snare, bleeding into the snow, I thought my time had come," he confessed. "Then you opened your door, and something in me knew. This woman will either save me or end me. There would be no middle ground." "And which has it been?" Ilara asked, half teasing, half serious. In answer, she stepped back, letting her cloak fall to the stone balcony. The silk beneath provided little barrier against the winter air, but Ilara barely felt the cold. Her blood sang with a different power now, one awakened by the mating bond, dormant until he had claimed her as his own. As Darius watched in amazement, Elara closed her eyes and reached for that power. It answered eagerly, rushing through her veins like liquid silver. Her body blurred, shifted, reformed, and where the queen had stood, a wolf now crouched, her fur as white as the snow falling around them. Darius's shock gave way to wonder, then to fierce joy. In a fluid motion, he shed his own human form, the great silver wolf taking its place. Larger than Elara's white form, he circled her once, twice, rubbing his muzzle against hers in greeting and recognition. It explained much. Why she had never feared the wolf at her door, why she had understood instinctively how to treat his wounds, why the mating bond had taken hold so strongly between them. Somewhere in her lineage, shapeshifter blood had flowed, diluted through generations until it seemed lost entirely, but not lost, hidden, waiting. The silver wolf that was Darius bumped playfully against her shoulder, then bounded to the balcony's edge, looking back at her with a clear invitation in his amber eyes. Without hesitation, the white wolf followed, leaping down to the gardens below with newfound grace. Together they raced through the moonlit snow, two wolves where a king and queen had stood, bound by fate, by choice, and by a love neither had expected to find. Above them, the winter moon shone bright, illuminating the path they would forge together, rulers of the 7 territories, guardians of their people, mates until the last moon's rise. And it had all begun with a simple choice: to open a door during a storm, to risk her life to save a stranger who would, by the next moon, make her queen. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.